Thanks, Andrew. And looks like this project's been built up a fair bit already, hasn't it? From my point of view, a real pleasure, in a sad sort of way, when David Eagling left the CRC, that I took on much more of the management of this opportunity. You know where it's come from. You've heard all the stories about phosphine and why we need to look at alternatives and managing for it, and this is one of the alternatives. But in getting to this opportunity, probably 18 months ago, we said, wow, what have we really got? This is not just about grains. What if we could control a whole range of insect pests without the use of toxic chemicals? We're talking about a food-grade silica product. As Munjari said, it's in your coffee, it's in your sugar and salt and pepper and your cups of soup. In fact, this product you can use in your food up to 2%. We're allowed to use it. You've all probably had some today. It has potential for organic certification. In some places around the world, it is certified as organic. We think there's potential for it to be applied to grains, almonds, and other stored foods. We could apply it in an industrial setting or in developing countries, potentially, into sacks or barrels in the corner of a village hut, and therefore contribute to food security in these countries where we've got very significant resistance or virtually no alternatives or no access to phosphine. And then we find it kills a whole range of amenity insect pests. So, a real opportunity. This is where it started back with Yonglin Ren and his team at Project 3003. As Munjari said, there's been about 17 different SAS products tested. There's 2 listed up here, number 7 and 8. Across the top is 5 common insects of pests in storage and grain. And then there's Dryacide down the bottom, which is another silica product, but it's a natural silica, diatomaceous earth. And you can see the level of control that we're getting in 5 and 10 days, basically 100% across the board. Dryacide doesn't really work in this circumstance. So we looked at some other insect pests. What else does it control? Here's almond moth and Indian meal moth. And the eggs and larvae were put into the almonds, and we assessed the level of damage to the almonds out to 100 days. So we had good control, no damage, 100 days. These were treated at 100 grams per tonne in the lab. So what other insects? So we tried a couple of common ant species, Singapore ant and garden ant, and we got mortality, 100% mortality in 6 hours. So we better push the system. Let's think about lower rates and longer periods. The first set of data you saw from 3003 was 150 grams per tonne. And that's down the bottom here, 150 grams per tonne, the same 5 insects, and we've run this out to 180 days, 100% control. In the middle there you can see it is 100 grams per tonne, and we start to see a little bit of drop-off, some differences between insects, and those become more pronounced when we start using 50 grams per tonne. So at the higher rates, which are extremely low, 150 grams per tonne, we're still getting the 100% control. Now, these are all laboratory-based experiments. Okay, a little bit about SAS. It's synthetic amorphous silica. It's not on the right-hand side of this graph. It's not crystalline silica, which is a great, of course, significant health concern. It is not the natural silica. In the middle of that graph, you can see in there it says diatomite. It's not the DEs, not the diatomaceous earth. It's a synthetic amorphous silica down on the left-hand side in the blue. There are many different synthetic amorphous silica products, and those numbers there are the CAS numbers, which indicate they're used for various things around the world. We haven't created a new product. What we're looking at is a new use of existing range of products. It has been known for 50-odd years that synthetic silica products can control insects, but nobody's cracked it. Nobody's worked out how we can make it work operationally. A little bit of background about one way of producing SAS, just to give you a feel for it. This is fumed silica, and basically out of the system you get your primary particles, which are fused very strongly into aggregates. Those aggregate bonds, when you take it out of the production system, can't be broken, but then they form agglomerates. And in fact, some in the industry say they then form granules. So it's important just to get a feeling for the size of the particles that we are talking about here. On the right-hand side, we have agglomerates that are in the order of 500 nanometers to a micron in size. And then on the left of that, my right, much bigger particle sizes with granules, which are just basically agglomerated aggregate particles. So we're talking really small particle size. The breakthrough that we think we've had is the activation of that SAS in combination with the package, which we've patented. Firstly, it's finding the right SAS products, and there are lots of SAS products out there, not so many with the specifications that we think are necessary to get the insect control that we want. The second component is activating that SAS, getting it in a form that we want without losing its food grade status. And the third element is then delivering it in an activated form to your target, whatever your target might be. And because it has so many potential applications, then in the middle of the triangle, we think about how we have to tailor the application to make sure that we activate it or have the right spec in the first place, activate it and deliver it in a fashion that is suitable for your particular industry or circumstance. Most of those were laboratory trials. Here's some data from our latest field trial, which Marjorie remarked on, which was in Yoting in Perth in March. And I just wanted to put that picture up. That is, you can see all the SAS there on that grain at 150 grams per tonne. Of course you can't. You can't see any of it. The material, when it is activated and delivered, is at such a particle size and so little of it that you cannot see it at all. This is what it looks like at 150 grams per tonne under a scanning electron microscope. Probably worth looking at, if I can get the scale here. That's 10 microns. This is magnified 3.3 thousand times. So the particle sizes we're talking about are really, really small. At 150 grams per tonne, preliminary data, we haven't got the final report yet. We got 100% control of 2 insect species within 2 weeks. This is in a quasi small-scale field trial. Really promising. This was partially activated SAS applied at less than 25 grams per tonne, and from the previous graph you could see all those sort of white lumps there are the SAS, much, much less up there. The same resolution, and yet we're still getting 80 to 95% control in 4 weeks. So some really exciting data out of our first preliminary trial. Imagine if we could control red imported fire ant. So with QDAF, again, very partially activated SAS, 2 SAS products, MU8 and MU9 for want of a better name, and basically we've got 80 to 100% kill in 48 hours. Just applied on the surface, have the ants walk across it. We also did it under a range of soil moisture conditions, and except at the extremely wet end of it, we still got quite good control. Furthermore, we saw a significant potential for transfer of the SAS, its ability to control, between ants. So for example, we had exposure of 10 RIFA workers for 60 seconds to SAS, put them in with 40 other RIFA workers who weren't exposed, and all 40 were killed. Sorry, all 50 were killed. So they actually transferred. Now, there were some inconsistencies in that one. We had 20 infected for 60 seconds and it didn't kill 30, but that's because the RIFA are very bloody smart ants. But lots of potential here in from our early trials. Here's some work we did funded by ACR in Timor Leste on mung beans. And there were 3 sites here, excuse for the busy graph, straight out of the thing, 3 sites representing 3 elevations above sea level to try and get different humidities in a very operational setting in villages. The treatments here was the MU8 product at 100 grams and 250 grams per tonne against a control, and that they normally use in these villages for control of insects when they store their mung beans is burnt rice husk. At the 250 grams per tonne, and this is very crudely activated, basically 5, 6, 8 months of protection. I got pretty excited. So the advantages of the package then, we know it's going to be active against many insect pests if we can manage it correctly. In fact, we think we've tested about 27 different pests at the moment, and there's many more we'd like to test. It targets only certain insects, only certain types of insects. We haven't put a really clear boundary around that yet, but there is oodles and oodles of literature about its safety to mammals, fish, plants and the environment generally. The data and tox testing that has been done out of USA and the European Union is enormous, and so we're fairly confident about its safety. It's quick acting, as you've seen. It's basically a food grade product. There's about 3 million tonnes of SAS produced annually each year, of which about 10% is a food grade product. So we're not about to run out of supply if we manage to make this work. You've seen some data which suggests we're going to have quite long-term protection. That will be subject to environmental conditions, and we really need to push those boundaries. We've done some preliminary tests with GrainCorp at Toowoomba about further downstream processing, and by and large, no issues. I've got a funding proposal in at the moment to test whether it affects beer brewing, but we haven't done that yet. That's next on the agenda. But basically, the opportunities here are to meet those growing consumer demands for non-chemical options. It's a food grade product already in use. So where to from here? We have to de-risk the technology and build confidence that it actually works. We have to optimise that package, that triangle. We have to know exactly what our preferred specs are. We have to know exactly what the key elements of that activation are and getting it right. We have to optimise the cost, the inputs, not just the SAS but the engineering component, and then we have to tailor it for each of our circumstances. Obviously we'll have to do the product registration process. Here it's through the APVMA, and for all this we'll need a significant amount of field trials to get confidence in performance and provide the data for those registrating authorities. We are focusing on grains in Australia but also almonds in the US, and happy to talk about why those two. To give you an idea of the value of the markets we are talking about, you've heard all about the importance of phosphine to grains in Australia, but if you think of the more broadly around the agricultural fumigant markets, and we're not going to take over the whole market, but we are going to, if we can make this work, be in these markets in a significant way. Those numbers are enormous. It doesn't matter whether they're 50% out, they're still enormous. They're not 50% out, by the way, they're pretty good numbers. And you can see from the second half of that the biggest market is North America. If we break that down and just talk about phosphine replacement, again, the world market's still pretty huge. That's $500 million per annum, of which, again, North America is by far the biggest market, $321 million per year. Australia is not a big market. Yes, it's important that we are here, and we're going to continue to develop the product technology package here with our bulk handlers, and we intend absolutely to be here operational, but we do, to make this product economically viable or the product package viable, we'll have to go global. In addition to fumigants and phosphine markets, we are talking about the Amenity pest markets further down the track. 2016, $3.5 billion, much bigger, is a major target once we get that proven up for this. So we've started that initial work on fire ant, which was funded by the Commonwealth Department of Ag and Water Resources. This will be probably a harder market to penetrate because it's dominated by the major multinationals. Then if you start thinking about the other markets like cockroaches and bed bugs, well, that's another $5 billion per annum market. So there are plenty of opportunities for us if we can make this work. So to do that, we have set up Davren Global Private Limited. It is a for-profit specialist company that we've now spun out of the CRC. We have secured the access through all the approval processes for the company to have that exclusive access to the IP. The intention is that 25% of that will be owned by PBCRC, which will be transferred to the foundation. We're seeking grant funds from multiple sources. We're seeking investment in equity from multiple sources. We've established 2 companies in the US to take this forward over there. Davren US as a holding company or head company in the US, plus Davren US Nuts, which will start in the tree nut industry, and particularly starting with almonds, where we have secured a couple of grants, one from the US government and one from the almond industry to start work, and seeking further grant funds and equity investment over there. I would like to thank the team. Obviously, Professor Wren and his team started this work in Murdoch, but once we saw the opportunity and how big it could be, it sort of brought it into the CRC board. For those of us who understand the structure of the CRC, there is actually 2 companies, and that's PBIP Limited sits under the CRC for exactly this reason in the CRC, to be able to commercialise. So I thank the PB board for giving us the guidance. Professor Wren and his team, QDAF's been involved, Kansas State University's been involved in a small way. David Eagling, I mentioned earlier, has been important in driving it early. John Thorne here on commercialisation, and the list goes on. There's a huge opportunity here. Thank you.